Get started. We ended off last week. We were talking about Shovavim and some of the Inyani Shovavim. We ended off last week talking about the pivot from Tanesim to Limud HaTorah and other types of Tikkunim during the Yemei Shovavim. Now, I wanted to talk about another one of the Tikkunim of Yemei Shovavim and just explore it a little more in depth. That tikkun being Amiras Tehillim, saying Tehillim, and I wanted to take this opportunity to explore a little bit what Tehillim is to Klal Yisrael B'chlal and some of the different inyanim of Tehillim. Now, we'll start like this. The problem is that I bumped into some dessert while I was preparing the main course for Tehillim, and we might have to start with dessert. It might be the right thing to do. B'chal even Shia. So let's just start with the facts. Facts on the ground. So there's a minig in Klal Yisrael that on Thursdays of Shovavim, for some people it's a fast day. If not, so there's just certain tefillas that they say. Now the Shovavim, the Tzanzer Rav, in his Igris brings down a shtickle maracha about the chshivas of Tehillim during the Yemei Shovavim. He brings down from the Chakal Yitzchak, who I think is the first Spinker Rebbe. I think there's only two Spinker Rebbes before the war. The first Spinker Rebbe, the Chakal Yitzchak, he brings down the chshivas of saying Tehillim during Shovavim, and he explains as follows. There's a famous Chazal that we'll explore a little bit more at length shortly. There's a famous Chazal that says that David HaMelech asked that Tehillim should be nechshav, like limud negoim v'arlis. Now, we'll talk about that more by Arichas in a minute, but says the Chakal Yitzchak b'shem the Chida, it's Yedua b'shem the Talmidim of the Arizal that the limud of Mishnayos Tyrus and Seder Tyrus is a takana for all Averis that have to do with Tyra, because the limud of Tyrus is b'mkoyim Averis of Tyra. So says the Chida, David HaMelech was mispalel that Tehillim should be like limud negoim v'alis. So Tehillim is also mechaper for all Averis that have to do with Tyra, because Tehillim is b'mkoyim negoim v'alis. That's what the Chida says. So says the Chida. Says the Chakal Yitzchak and the Shovavim and many others of the same school of thought. There's a big inyan to say Tehillim b'tzibur during Shovavim to be misakin for these things, and they would get together on Thursday nights and say Shovavim. Now there's different minhagim. Some people would stay up the whole night and say Tehillim. Some people would say Tehillim till Chatzos. Some people would only start saying Tehillim after Chatzos. And we'll see why all those things are kind of relevant in a second. But there was many different minhagim of saying Tehillim during Yemei Shovavim. Now, okay, so I think Geveintlich, everyone thinks of Tehillim. You think of Tefillah, l'chayra, right? Someone's sick, you need Yeshua. Yeshua, it's a standard thing. Klal Yisrael says Tehillim. We think of Tehillim as Tefillah. So the Zimra is full of Tehillim. Tehillim is very much in our minds as Tefillah. But if you stop and think for a second, Tehillah is part of the Tanakh. Tehillim is one of the Chaftal Sifrei Tanakh. You wouldn't have a Havamina that Bereshis is Tefillah, or that Mishlei is Tefillah. For some reason, Tehillim is the only one of the Chaftal Tzvarim of Sifrei Tanakh that is, at least Be'enei Ha'am, Kol Kulei Tefillah. It's not something that we look at as Torah B'chlal. So, I want to really unpack that a little bit and see the different schools of thought about what exactly Tehillim is, and Memela what the value of saying it in the Chshivas Klal Yisrael is. But I just want to start with dessert, because, dessert. At the Asina Lahachi that we're talking about Tehillim and Shovavim, so I came across this very interesting thing. Now, let me just tell you who he is first of all. There's a makubal, a minor makubal in Yerushalayim in the early 1900s. His name was Yitzchak Alfia. I think today it's a Syrian name. Today there's Alfies. It got Americanized. I know someone, Jack Alfie. It's still a Sephardi name. It's a Sephardi family name, a Syrian Sephardi name. But there was a makubal. His name was Yitzchak Alfia. He lived in Yerushalayim in the early 1900s. He came from Damascus. He moved to Yerushalayim. He was part of the Chevrat Beit El, the Sephardi Chevras Mekubalim in the old city of Yerushalayim. He's a minor Mekubal. We don't have much. He's not like a big player in the Mekubalim school in Yerushalayim. But he did write an interesting few Svarim. They're called HaKuntrus HaYichieli. The way that it's relevant to most people is a lot of the Likat Svarim in Hilchos Mezuzah bring down psakim from him on Hilchos Mezuzah, because it's like broken up into many little contrasim inside there, and one of the contrasim has a lot of like regular down to earth psakim on Hilchos Mezuzah, that makes it a lot of the Likat Svarim on Hilchos Mezuzah. But He first published it Tehillim Shmoi without his name. Later on, it became known who he was, and it was republished in one volume, Hakunshas Yechieli, with his name on it. My father has it at home. I got it in Netzar Chacham on Hebrew books, but it exists. Now, in the Kunshas Yechieli, he references a special chabura that he opened in 1919. He was a shaykhit by trade. I think that's what he did for his bread and butter. He was a shaykhit. At some point, for a small tkuf, he was a dayan, and then he opens this kehillah. This kehillah is called Oirach Chadash V'Tzemach Tzadik. It's like a subgroup within a shul. It's called Oirach Chadash V'Tzemach Tzadik. He opens it up, and they have, and in Hakunshas Yechieli and Chelik Aleph, there's many of the minhagim and the tefillas and kilu. What's the drive? It was a kehillah of steiging. It wasn't a kehillah just like to daven together. They had specific, goals they were trying to accomplish, and what the different things they were trying to do. Now, one of the defining characteristics of this kehillah that he opened was that he had a special seder tikkun that he did. It was called. It's in bold letters over here. He says it's Tainis Dibur V'Skulas at Tehillim. We had a special thing we got together. They did it once a year to get together to do the school of Tainis Dibur and Skulas at Tehillim. And with this he says V'Sachaper Kol Chateisecha B'Mechaper Ol Yaveris. Now, very important is where this differs from other people. Is he goes off to expound and he says that Tainis Dibur is way better than Tainis not eating. Tainis not eating is not for our generation. It's too hard. We're not up to that. He says this is any day that you find that you're able to do this, so do a Tainis Dibur in the school of Tehillim, Bein B'Chol, Bein B'Shabbos. There's no Isser Tainis Dibur on Shabbos. There's an Isser Tainis, a regular Tainis Achila on Shabbos. So he says, and then he brings, and this is a Svardi Makubal in Yerushalayim. He brings, because it's Yedua, he says that the Hagoyin Rabbeinu Noam Elimelech, the Talmidei Harav, he brings one another Talmidim Heij, Al Yedei Zeh Yachav As HaYetzer. He says, Al Yedei saying the whole Sefer Tehillim one could be Kaifa as Yetzer. And then he explains, the Noam Elimelech says that Al Yedei saying Sefer Tehillim, it has the same chshivas as fasting Mishabbos l'Shabbos, fasting for an entire week. Now, and then he continues, he says, and it's Yedua in the Ksavim of the Talmidei Arizal, that one who fasts Mishabbos l'Shabbos, it's as if he fasted 65,000 Tainesim. Meaning by putting it together, by stacking it 1 week in a row, it's as if a person fasted 65,000 Tainesim. So it says, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfia, so I have a way to turbocharge your Tainesim. You want to get, 100,000 Tainesim, simple Eitzah. Take a day, Tainis Dibur with Skulas at Tehillim, say the whole Tehillim in one day, together with the Tainis Dibur, which counts as a fast, Mishabbos l'Shabbos, according to the Noam Elimelech. And according to the Kisvei of the Ksavim, the Talmidei Arizal, that counts as 65,000 Tainesim. So add it up. I just turbocharged your Tainis drive. Do it a few days in a row, and you have hundreds of thousands of Tainesim. So it says this is mamish the key to unlock all the Tainesim that are doing it. Now, what's the day that they chose to make in his kehillah this Tainis Dibur Skulas at Tehillim? It's Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Tomorrow would be the day that in the kehillah of Oirach Chadash V'Tzemach Tzadik they would fast on that day. Now he goes off on a footnote and he's Ma'irich Al Pisoid. Why Rosh Chodesh Shvat is the right Rosh Chodesh for this. And then he continues the Hoyel V'Hu Gamkin Miyemois HaShovavim Az Yoel Gamkin L'Tikkun Avoyin Haba Mebrius. He continues. He says that a good chelik of the reason why we were masakin to do it dafka on Rosh Chodesh Shvat is because it's the middle of Shovavim. Now it's not the beginning of Shovavim, it's not the end of the Shovavim. I'm not sure what the. So there's other ancillary reasons why Rosh Chodesh Shvat is the perfect time. But says Rabbi Yitzchak Alfia that the reason why he's masakin this turbocharged tikkun of Tainis without fasting is in order that it's the middle of Shovavim. So you harness the Skulas at Tehillim and the inyan of Tainis during Shovavim, which are the two main inyanim of Shovavim, and all this is without actually fasting. Now, I wasn't able to find the hard copy of the Sefer, but I saw it quoted by other people. Rabbi Yaakov Hillel has a Sefer that he put out called Takanas HaShavim, which is all the different Kabbalistic Shovavim schoolis, etc. And in the middle of the Sefer, he brings down this trick from the Kunshas Yechieli, and he's very, very distressed by it. And he says it's not Yitachin that he shows many sources where the Guri Ari wrote about the need for Tanesim and multiple Tanesim, and and the extensive need based on certain Averis and etc. And he says it's impossible that there could be such a shortcut where you could just say the whole Sefer Tehillim and have a Tainis Dibur for a day, and like that you cut through all the red tape. It's impossible, and he has a whole arichas. He very much does not like this shortcut. Now, b'chol, I don't think it became very, very popular, but in a small amount of, in a small circles, this was the tikkun of Shovavim that they used to do. Now, why do I say dessert? I'll tell you why. Because in another one of his svarim that he published after Kunshas Tehillim, it's called Eirech Chadash V'Tzemach Tzadik. It's named after the Chabura. He didn't write it himself. One of his Talmidim from the Chabura wrote it. But it's all, Marbar Vashi Chasam Alei. It's all his Teiris. And in there he tells a story about the Tainis Dibur of his school at Tehillim. He says in 1942, it was the middle of the Second World War in Yerushalayim, and he lived in the old city then still, and one night he went to sleep and he had a dream. And in the dream, an old tzaddik, in robes and a rabbinic hat, came to him in the dream and he says, Shamati Allah, I heard about you, that you do different tikkunim and skulis by different kvarim. How come you never came to mine? He says, I don't know who you are. How can I come to your kever? So he says, I'm Yaakov Abu Chatzeri, he tells him. And where are you buried? I'm buried in I don't know how to pronounce it, Dimnahor. It's a small town in Egypt where the Abir Yaakov Abu Chatzeri is buried. He says, how come you don't come to my kever? Okay, then the dream ends. He jumps out of bed, he runs to the Chaburas Beit El, where his Chaverim Adam Kubalam are, and he asks them, did anybody ever hear of this Yaakov Abu Chatzera? Someone came to be Yaakov Abu Chatzera. I don't know who he is. Anybody ever heard of him? He said, yeah, Vada, we heard of him. It's Abir Yaakov. He's buried in Egypt, in Damnahar. But it's impossible to get there now. It's the middle of World War II. Erwin Rommel, the Nazi general, is busy rampaging through North Africa on his way to Eretz Yisrael at that point. The British are fighting him, but you can't get there. It's the middle of an active war zone. Says Afal Pikein, I gotta go. I have to go there. So he goes to the British governor of Yerushalayim at that time in 1942. I don't know the guy's name, and he says, and this he writes this all himself. This is all in his other sefer. So he says, I must go down to this small town in Egypt to daven at a kever, and the British governor tells him the only thing that's traveling between Palestine and Egypt right now are military trains. There is no other transport going on. Nobody's going from here to there. It's closed. A military train? I'll go on a military train. He says, does it look like they're going to let you on a military train? Like with your long robes? And he says, don't worry, no one's going to notice me. He takes his two, gabayim, his two assistants, and he writes that they sneak onto the military train and nobody notices them. A day later, they get off at Dam Nahar, they find the kever, and they go in there, the three of them together, and they stage a three-day marathon of this tikkun of Tainis Dibur V'Skulas HaTehillim. They say the Tainis Dibur V'Skulas HaTehillim 3 times in a row, like a 3-day marathon by the kever. And then at the end of the 3 days, he says they come out and they see this joy in the streets and everyone's happy and they ask, what happened? General Montgomery, the British general, beat Erwin Rommel at the second battle of El Amin, and the Germans were turned back and they're on the retreat. They're going back to Tunisia now, and they're on their way out. We're chasing them out of North Africa. And he writes that when he was by the kever, while he was doing this tikkun of Tainis Dibur and Skulas HaTehillim, he saw like an Arab Bekeah from the kever, and he understood this to mean that the Vice says this was the tikkun that was needed to turn back the tide. So that's why I say dessert, because this very tikkun that he invented for Shovavim, in one of his later svarim, he uses as some sort of tikkun to beat the Nazis, which, whatever, it's an interesting story by any account. Now let's go back to the main dish. So let's handle what the Tehillim is. So we led with this perception that everybody sees Tehillim as tefillah. Everyone probably sees Tehillim as tefillah, and really maybe that isn't what it is. So let's start from the beginning of it. So the Gemara in Bab Basra, Kaidu, a famous Gemara, the Gemara in the Dharma Dafidalad Mudbeis. The Gemara brings down the Seder of all the Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Who wrote what? Sorry, I think it's Tesai. No, it's right here. Yeah. Sidron Shel Ksuvim. The Sidron Shel Ksuvim, who wrote what? So the Gemara brings down that David Kasaf to Sefer Tehillim. The Gemara says David wrote Sefer Tehillim. Ayidei Asar Zakenim. Now the way it's mashma over here, the way Rashi teaches, is Ayidei Asar Zakenim means he gathered together the different piyutim that were already in existence from Asar Zakenim. Ayidei Adam Rishon, Ayidei Malki Tzedek, Ayidei Avram, Ayidei Moshe, Ayidei Haman, Ayidei Asaf, Ayidei Shlesh Bnei Korach. That's what the Gemara in Baba Basra says. That David HaMelech gathered together different piyutim that existed already, and he put together Sefer Tehillim. That's what the Gemara in Baba Basra says. And the Gemara in Baba Basra says this is one of the Seder Ksuvim. Now the Ksuvim we know is Torah by all accounts. So it sounds like Tehillim is Torah, that David Melech collected some different pizmainim that different great people wrote before him, and collected them in Tehillim. Now the problem is that some of Tehillim is written after David. The Mashal Al Naris Bavel, for example, is written after the Churban. It's a song that's reflecting after the Churban. It's not the only one. There are ones that are from after the Churban. So this Gemara Kilo doesn't encompass all the Pizmani Tehillim. So now there's a Medrash Sheikh Tov. The Medrash on Tehillim is called Sheikh Tov. The Medrash Sheikh Tov brings down a slightly different nusach of this Maimer Chazal. The Medrash on Sheikh Tov says David HaMelech. The Medrash says as follows: 10 Zikanim had shiras v'tishbachas that they wanted to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And maybe they said them. Maybe they had feelings they wanted to express. But Hashem told them, it's better for me if David HaMelech expresses them. Because David HaMelech is Ne'im Zmira. He has a beautiful voice. He sings well. He expresses it well. David HaMelech will bring these Zmiras to the fore. David HaMelech will express these Zmiras. So, in the Medrash, the way the Bryce is brought down in the Medrash, it sounds like none of these other 10 people that David HaMelech wrote Tehillim Al Yedei actually said Tehillim. David HaMelech said all the Tehillim. It was just Al Yedei, he was expressing an inspirational moment that existed B'tkufas Avram Avinu, that existed B'tkufas Moshe Rabbeinu. So based on that, says the Even Ezra in his Akdamat to Tehillim, he says it's a big mavucha between the Mefarshim. If Tehillim is written Baruch HaKodesh, it's not written Baruch HaKodesh, was it written like the 10 Chachamim, was it not? He says, Nirali, David HaMelech wrote the whole thing, Al Yedei Baruch HaKodesh, based on specific giluyim from different, previous dairis, and likewise from future dairis. And David HaMelech was able to write, expressing the sentiment for future dairis as well. So David HaMelech wrote Tehillim in a way that it expressed before him and after him, but it was all like David HaMelech. That's what the Even Ezra starts with Tehillim with. And so Tehillim is from the Ksuvim. It's written on Piruach HaKodesh by David HaMelech, expressing different things from different dairis. So now let's talk about that side, that Tehillim is Torah. So if Tehillim is Torah, so what exactly is this grace, thing that every time that a person has a tzara, we say Tehillim? Why is Tehillim? Maybe we should learn Baba Kama when you have a tzara. You take it to Baba Kama and just learn through it until it goes away. Why is Tehillim the thing? So let's just start like this. There's a steer in the Gemara. There's a famous Gemara in Eruvin. The Gemara in Eruvin in Daf Daled says, Amar B'Shua ben Levi, Hachash b'Reishay, someone who has a headache, Yasik Batera. It's a famous Gemara. Hachash b'Bitnoi, stomachache, Yasik Batera. Hachash b'Chol Gufay, Yasik Batera. That's a B'Shua ben Levi's member. So that's member one from B'Shua ben Levi. Next member from B'Shua ben Levi is the Gemara in Sanhedrin in the Tzadik Aleph. The Gemara in Sanhedrin in the Tzadik Aleph says, Haloichesh ala Makkah, someone who says psukim from the Torah on a Makkah to make it feel better. And Rashi says the psukim that one would say is Kol HaMachla Shesamti B'Mitzrayim Le'asam Alecha. You say the pasuk Kol HaMachla Shesamti B'Mitzrayim Le'asam Alecha on a Makkah. So Haloichesh ala Makkah, says Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Chayev Misa. Why? She'asa me'ha Torah refuas haguf, ve'eni ela refuas hanefesh. You made the Torah into refuas haguf, like a medical potion that heals physical ailments. And that's not what the Torah is. The Torah is refuas hanefesh. That's Rabbi Shua ben Levi. It's effective Kveger and Gilyon Ashas, and effective Teres Chaim and many others. It's a steer in Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi in the Gemara in Eruvin says, Hachash b'Roisai Yasik Batera. Over there, Rabbi Shua ben Levi says the opposite, that one who's Isik Batera to be Merapa, a physical ailment, is Chayiv Misa. So there's a teretz from the Teres Chaim in Shavuos that I think I want to just say over. So the Gemara in Shavuos, the Mishnah in the beginning of Shavuos, in the I'm in the Dharam. It's not going to help us. Okay, fine. Anyhow, the Mishnah in the Mishnah in Shavuos says that that if someone wants to be moisif onto the walls of the chayma of the here we go. Thank you. What did you say? Yeah, sorry. Hang on. The Mishnah in Shavuos in the beginning of the second parak says as follows. It says, Ein moisifin ala ir v'ala azara. We don't add on to the walls of the ear or the azara. Ela b'melech v'navi v'orim v'tomim v'sanhedrin shel shivim v'achad u'b'shtei tayvis tu karbanis u'b'shir. And then it says with song. When you're adding on to the chaymas of the Beis Hamikdash, the chaymas of Azara, it needs to be b'shir. Now the Mishnah doesn't say what the shir is. So now if you go to the Gemara says u'b'shir tanar rabbanan. How do you do the shir? Arimimcha Hashem. The Gemara brings down a bunch of kapitlich Tehillim that we say. Either we say Mimcha Hashem Ki Delisani, or Shir Shal Pagayim, V'yeshem Shir Shal Negayim, and then the Gemara brings different psukim. Mizmul David Baruch Pe'av Shalom B'noi, Ma'rabu Tzarei Alai, La'Hashem HaYeshua, Alam Chabir Chasachasela. The Gemara brings many different psukim from Tehillim, that when the Mishnah is referring to the shir that one needs to do to be Moisif on the Azara and the Beis HaMikdash, the shir is these psukim from Tehillim. Now the Gemara continues, and strangely enough, pay attention to the man the Amar is, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Amar Lahu Lahani Kroi, Rabbi Shua Levi ben Levi Alain. Now this is a Maiserav, this is about him himself. Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Amar Lahu Lahani Kroi, he would say these psuke shir, these psukim that are song, vegani, and then he would go to sleep. Meaning, what it implies is, he would use it as like a shmira, like a kriyash malamita. He would say these psukim, these shir shal pagayim, the shir that was said to add onto the walls, vegani, and then he would go to sleep. That was his shmira. So, in fact, the Gemara, Heichi Avid Hachi, how could you do that way? I've Amr Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Asal Shabbos b'divrei Torah. Rabbi Shua ben Levi, and the Gemara Kilo asks the same kasha, Rabbi Shua ben Levi's own anhaga. In fact, the Gemara, Rabbi Shua ben Levi's own anhaga, doesn't Rabbi Shua ben Levi himself in Sanhedrin say, Asal Shabbos b'divrei Torah? So the Gemara says a teretz. Zak the Gemara, a teretz. Lahage and shani. Lahag and shani, to protect yourself is different. That's what lahag and shani, to protect yourself is different. When Rabbi Shua ben Levi was saying these psukim at night to fall asleep, it was lahag and shani. He wanted to protect himself from mazikim or from whatever could come balayla. So he said lahag and shani, he said Tehillim. But to say it al amakeh for refuah, like to be loichash on amakeh to affect the refuah, that's aser. So now, it's a little bit of a hard distinction to understand. L'chayra, you're also using the psukim. You're using the psukim in a practical sense, right? Lahag and shani. So says the Teres Chaim that we know from the Gemara in Saita that Torah, the Gemara refers to Torah as migno matzla. Torah is megin, it protects. So says the Teres Chaim, that's what the word lahagin over here means. Lahagin over here doesn't mean to protect, like, oh, I'm scared, let me say Tehillim to protect myself from the fear. Lahagin means, if one understands that Tehillim is Torah, and Torah is megin umatzel, then a person can say Tehillim lahagin. Meaning you understand that Tehillim is Torah, you're going to learn some Torah now to be megin umatzel, and then you're able to do it. And if you look, the Rambam in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, in Parakid Beis Halacha Yud Aleph, the Rambam paskins as follows. The Rambam brings Rabbi Shua ben Levi's din. The Rambam says Haloicha Shal Amaka is like Avodah Avodah Zarah. V'lo yoid is that you mevazah devrei Torah she'osim mehem refuas aguf ve'eina mela refuas hanefesh. But says the Rambam, one who wants to learn some Gemara or say Tehillim lahagein al atzmai, that's allowed. So the Rambam brings clearly Tehillim and Limud in the same Rambam. Meaning the whole idea of Amir's Tehillim is like the Rambam. The way the Rambam is presenting it from the based on the Gemara and Shavuos is lahagein. A person says Tehillim for the schar of Limud HaTorah, the Hagana that Limud HaTorah provides. That's what a person says Tehillim for. As I like the Rambam, this is a tzaddik in the Rambam. Now, it happens to be that in Yerushalayim there's a famous legend. I have a book of stories that Shmuel Auerbach used to say over, and in there's a story he said over that from his grandfather of Chaim Leib. In Yerushalayim there was a legend that there was a kmeya, that a sealed kmeya that people would pass around. Like when someone had a tzara, they'd go get the kmeya and they'd bring it to the house. And the kmeya came from the Taz. It came from Holoshav, from the Taz city in Poland. And the kmeya was brought with people to Eretz Yisrael and was passed down. He says it came a time where someone opened up the Taz's kmeya, wanted to see what it is, and they found it was literally 2 lines. It sounds like you already know it. They opened 2 lines and it says the schos of the limud of Taisvis. I don't remember if it's in Baba Kama or Avodah Zarah. I didn't look up the story. The schos of the limud of Taisvis in Daf whatever. Tamid l'schusam. I say the Taz. The Taz's kmeya was literally the Taz. It's brought down about the Taz. Rav Chaim Volozhiner in Ruach Chaim brings down a story you do about the Taz. Yeah, he doesn't say kmeya. He just says kayidua about the Taz that he used schos HaTorah like this. But Shmuel Auerbach used to say over from his grandfather that they had such a kmeya that was like, what did you say? Yeah, the back end of that story was that it was a Taisvis in Avodah Zarah, Baba Kama, I don't remember, and the Taz would see. So meaning the Taz interpreted this Rambam, mamash at face value. Tehillim is Baba Kama, and you take a schos from either Tehillim, Baba Kama, or Eiv, or Chumash, or whatever you want, and as long as you understand that Megan means that it's a Haganav, because it's schos HaTorah, so you say Tehillim. What do you say? Even Blav Idna, yeah, exactly. It could have longer. It could have longer effect. True, it could have longer. Yeah. Why do you need it now? You're saying why do you need Dafka now? One second. We're getting there. I'm not going to leave Klal Yisrael high and dry. Relax. I just want to before we leave this position, I just want to read you something from some Zalman Auerbach, who's a very normative Klal Yisrael approach. In Halicha Shleima, his Halacha Sefer Nilchos Tefillah, he says as follows. I'll read it for you. Ba'amiras Pirkei Tehillim B'tzibur L'schos Refuas Chayla. Says this idea of saying Tehillim B'tzibur L'schos Refuas Chayla. Yidaktiku, he says L'hachar Shmoi Kaim Shemaschil L'Spal K'desh Yizkar Tzibur Tzulas Malav. First announce the name. Then he continues. Ba'amiras Sefer Tehillim. When one says Sefer Tehillim, Ein L'chavim Pir She'inin K'pshutei. Don't be mechav in the words kipshuta what they mean. Like when you daven other tefillas, the words mean something. You say those words. Don't be mechav in that by tehillim. You say esein you think esein alaharim when you're davening. Don't be mechav like that. Mishum the ikar ma'alasa shall amiras tehillim al pi pshat. Says the pasha pshat of the mile of amiras tehillim. Dr. Shem Zalman. He mishum Talmud Torah. Straight up, it's because it's learning. Uchulshain HaRambam, he makes the same diak, Parakid Aleph, Melchus Avodah Zarah, Alach Yid Beis, Habari Shekara Psukim Umizmeri Tehillim, someone who's healthy who reads Psukim and Mizmeri Tehillim, Kadei Shetagei and Allah of Schos Kriyasam, which comes from the Gemara in Shavuos, like we showed, the Yinatzel Mitzaris, it sounds like in the future, like you're saying, the Yinatzel Mitzaris, Umin Zakim, Reiza Mutter, that's Mutter. Kilaymar, says Shekayre V'Loymid Pirkei Tehillim Shamim Davar Melech Ol HaShalom, Shem Kisvei HaKodesh. It's part of the Nevi'im, like we saw in the Gemara, part of the Ksuvim, like we saw in the Gemara Basra. So it's Limud HaTorah. The Rambam says, like it's Mash from the Gemara Basra, you should have Kavanah for Limud HaTorah. Now here's where he starts turning the corner a little bit. He says, "Misayir al yidei zeh, al yidei this Limud HaTorah yimayir l'cheshik v'yidvekas b'Hashem k'moi davar ha'melech ha'Shalom. V'schus zeh tamud lo l'chayla shetavakish avuri. And this schus zal beishtein either the person who's saying it or the person he's saying it for. Umei high time he says bachru leimar tehillim l'schus ha'chayla. Now he addresses the elephant in the room. If Tehillim is just Limud HaTorah, so why Tehillim? Say Bava Kama, learn Chumash. Why is Tehillim the one that Klal Yisrael throughout all the days chose to say in a tight spot? Yosem milim dvar macherim l'schusay. He says Mipnei zeh limud shegam ma'ir salev adam l'deikes b'Hashem. This is limud that has like a zaytig side benefit, and it's also ma'ir a person. The words of this limud are inspirational. They're also ma'ir a person to deikes on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we chose to say these words that have the maila of Limud HaTorah, and it also inspires the person to deikes by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'kiven shekain pshita shetzarach lahavin. Fine. This is what he goes off on. Now, Shem Zalman is saying klar that it's learning, but there's an added element of dveikus and korvat HaKadosh Baruch Hu that arises from it. Now, what he's really saying is a famous thing from the Baal Tanya. The Baal Tanya writes that David HaMelech, we said in the beginning, David, that Tehillim should be like Negoim V'Alas. It should have the same schos as Limud Negoim V'Alas. So, in fact, the Baal Tanya, is one chelik of Torah better than another chelik of Torah? Is Negoim V'Alas better than Bava Kama? What's the difference? What's the tefillah of David HaMelech? If the Baal Tanya is also coming with the premise, Tehillim is Torah, it's part of the Ksuvim. What does it pass to ask that Tehillim should be like Negoim V'Alas? All Torah is the same. So says the Baal Tanya, a lot of Hilchas Tumah V'Tayr, Hilchas Negoim V'Alas, is not Negeya for regular people. It's Negeya for someone who's a Kohen, someone who's living B'Tahara, or a Nida, or etc. It's not Negeya for everybody. So David Melech was asking that let someone who can't shtel zechzut to Tehillim, who can't really be part of it, who can't really be on the level to express Tehillim how it should be, let it still work for him like Negoim V'Alas. Just like Negoim V'Alas is not a lima that actually pertains lemaisa to most people who are learning it, and afal pikin you get the schar of limud HaTorah and it's a regular limud. So Tehillim should also be a type of limud that pertains to everybody, even if it doesn't actually pertain to everybody. So this this extra dveikus, or this extra korva that Shem Zalman is describing is really what the Baal Tanya is talking about. Now I see that I'm not going to have enough time to get to everything about Tehillim. We might have to break it up in two pieces. Let me just say one piece, and we might have to continue, but. There's a vart from the Kotzker that I think highlights a little bit about what Tehillim is to Klal Yisrael, and this is really the segue to the other school of thought. But there's a vart from the Kotzker as follows. There's a Gemara in Sanhedrin and Tzadik Beis that says, after Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah came out of the Kivshin Eish, Nebuchadnezzar was so impressed with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kaiches that he started saying Shira. And it's about 10 words in Sefer Daniel where Nebuchadnezzar expresses his Shira to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Gemara says, Bikish Nebuchadnezzar laker kol shira David. Nebuchadnezzar was on his way to being oiker all the shirim of David HaMelech because he was going to say shira that was so much better, so much more potent than David HaMelech's shira that there'd be no makom for David HaMelech's shira. So Bam Malach came, Satri al Panav, gave him a patch, and miyad pasek he stopped saying shira. That's the Gemara in Sanhedrin. So Frek the Kotzka Akasha, what's the difference to us who the mechaber of the shira is? If Nebuchadnezzar was going to be able to say better shira, so we would have had better shira. We'd say over Tehillim from Nebuchadnezzar. What do we care if it's Tehillim from Nebuchadnezzar, it's Tehillim from David HaMelech? It's like we're Let Nebuchadnezzar say good Tehillim, we'll say it over. So says the Kotzker, that's not what happened over here. The Malach didn't stop him because we didn't want the Mechaber of Tehillim to be Nebuchadnezzar. So the Malach stopped him as follows. Nebuchadnezzar was in a moment of like euphoria. He was understanding and seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu so clearly that Tehillim was pouring out of him, Tehillim. He felt very close. He really saw HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Ba Malach V'Satra, Malach gave him a patch and said, says the Kotzker, let me see if you could still sing after a patch. Everybody could sing when it's going easy. Let's give you a patch, let's see if you could sing after a patch. And Takan Nebuchadnezzar couldn't sing after a patch. He stopped singing after a patch. So it's not shot that his Tehillim wouldn't have been good. It was unworthy. Tehillim that we have from David HaMelech is Tehillim for all seasons. It's Tehillim that David HaMelech, it says, Mizmul David B'Barchim P'nei Avshalom B'noi. It's Tehillim for all seasons. It's Tehillim that David HaMelech sang in every matziv, in every situation, whether the Korvat HaKadosh Baruch Hu is close or far, it's Megillah, it's Mechosa. So Memela Klal Yisrael has the ability to draw out of that Tehillim in all situations. Now, there's really a lot more to say about Tehillim as a tefillah, but I don't want to schlep sich, so I think we'll continue. The second school of thought of what Tehillim is, I guess what it actually is for us, we'll continue with. No.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.